Welcome, everyone. My name is John Stever, and I will be co-hosting this session today. I am joining you all from Kigali, Rwanda, where I work as the head of R&D for the Innovation for Policy Foundation. Thank you for joining us and this discussion today about the Global Assembly. We're going to be talking about fulfilling the original promise of the 1972 Stockholm Conference. It is clear that while the vocabulary and personalities may have changed in the last half century, the issues we face today, war, poverty and inequality, colonial and neo-colonial exploitation, and the triple planetary crisis are the same crises that humanity faced 50 years ago. These crises are not the result of a technological crisis or of a particular decision, in fact. These crises result from the way in which we organize ourselves and make decisions together as a species. In other words, we are facing a governance crisis, and we owe it to ourselves and to future generations to imagine and build better institutions and processes for taking decisions together as a species. I'm honored to be joined today by two assembly members, Dian Bosniakovic and Fan Yu Mang, who were recruited in Italy and China, respectively, a community host from Recife, Brazil, Amanda Suarez, and two cluster facilitators, Peilin Chen from the Shimmer SDG Hub in China, and Septrin Kalamba from Mindanao State University, the Iligan Institute of Technology. We're going to talk today about this new global infrastructure for decision-making, an alternative approach. We call it the Global Assembly. In 2021, we organized the Global Assembly as the first ever global citizens assembly composed of individuals from all walks of life and from every corner of the globe, deliberating about the climate and ecological crisis. The 100 members, known as the Core Assembly, hailed from 49 countries, ranged in age from 16 to 76, and collectively spoke 39 languages. The stated goal for their work last year was to address the question, how can humanity address the climate and ecological crisis in a fair and effective way? The response from the assembly members took the form of the People's Declaration for the Sustainable Future of Planet Earth, a document named and deliberated upon by the assembly members throughout 67 hours of deliberation leading up to COP26 last year in Glasgow and beyond. This People's Declaration included proposals for the right to a clean and healthy and sustainable environment to be enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the demand for comprehensive programs on education and climate issues around the world, and for detailed proposals for the just and equitable phasing out of fossil fuels, among other subjects. We're here today as members of the Assembly and organizers, together to share about this alternative approach, about the outcomes from this alternative approach, the Global Assembly last year, and to show that citizens need to have a seat at the global governance table. With that introduction, I will hand it over to my colleague Septrin Kalamba to talk about the approach of sortition, or the selection of the members of the Assembly last year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. It's good afternoon from my end. My name is Septrin Kalamba. I'm an academic and researcher at Mindanao State University, Iligan Institute of Technology, Southern Philippines, particularly in the island of Mindanao. Together with my colleagues from our organization, we serve as the cluster facilitators for the Global Assembly. In 2011, in the Global Assembly, we publicly ran a global lottery based on population densities to randomly identify the 100 locations from around the world, which we would invite our Global Assembly participants. These 100 points produced by this lottery, or this, also called as the sortition, are the locations from where we recruited participants for the Core Assembly. As part of the aspirations of the Global Assembly, in the future, we hope to perform this global lottery with 1,000 participants. Once the locations were chosen, we identified and recruited organizations like our university, the MSU Center for Local Governance Studies, into a network of what we call cluster facilitators, which you can see on the screen. There are 10 regional clusters and there are 9 cluster facilitators from across the globe. We organize the work in geographic and linguistic regions around the world. So these are committed organizations that co-created the Global Assembly together with other members of our community of practice. We as cluster facilitators, together with many other partners in our community of practice, we recruited local community organizations in each of 100 locations, authentic and trusted local community conveners, such as Amanda's organization, our colleague here in Recife in Brazil. We call these organizations the community hosts, and we believe that our community hosts also embody the values of the Global Assembly. Each community host then engaged in recruitment process designed to identify and invite people at random. These methods could be used consistently anywhere in the world, such as conversations on the street and by door knocking. We use this methodology to make sure that the recruitment was not biased towards mobile phone ownership and also those who have formal addresses. Our community hosts, in total, our community hosts recruited an average of around 6 people in each location for a total pool of 675 candidates worldwide. What happened next? In selecting our final participants for the Global Assembly, we ran a second lottery, or the sortation as it's technically called, to identify 100 people from our pool of candidates, such that we recruited 1 person in each of the selected locations to represent each location. And so the ultimate pool reflected the diversity of the human population in terms of gender, also socioeconomic status as measured by education, outcome, age, and of course their perspectives on climate crisis, on climate change and ecological crisis. The experience of co-creating this event is promising in improving better the deliberative infrastructure, or creating the deliberative infrastructure, knowing that there are local communities and organizations committed to upholding the values of the Global Assembly. Personally, as a cluster facilitator and the rest of the members of our community of practice, being part of this event is a fantastic opportunity to connect with others globally. One important output is the conduct of community assemblies worldwide, which will be shared to us by our colleague here, Blair, in the next presentation. So that's all from me. Thank you very much, and handing it over to you, Blair or John.
So I'll be sharing the experience that I have during the process of coordinating community assemblies and community hosts in China. And my self-introduction is that I'm the CEO and co-founder of Shumer SDGs Hub, and I act as the cluster facilitator of the GA 2021 in China. So as you can see from the picture here, actually communities worldwide are able to participate directly and openly through community assemblies. Like Stockholm+50, it has 2 critical categories. One is the Stockholm+50 formal program, and then it's the associated events. We have the same system in the Global Assembly, which means we have the core assembly where everyone are able to speak for themselves and form a people's declaration. And in the community assembly, locally, they can share their ideas about their own community problems that they're concerned, and share solutions that they can do for their communities. So I'm going to show you an example that we have. It's the community assembly in Beijing. And you can see from the picture here, there's a lot of foreigners and Chinese local people. What they are doing is that they use mosaic art to find hopes and receive their feelings. They don't want just like come together and just talk. They want to actually do something, which you can see from the back of their the community. There's a wall that actually put all their mosaic art cubes together, and form the art. And this it's put in a German school in Beijing, and they are using elements symbolize their hope and fears, which has turtles, ice, waves, earth, sun, stars, moons, trees, and shows that this is the symbol of our mankind and the hope of our next generation. So we receive comments from parents like they come to me and said they really want to bring their kids to workshops and classes like that, and they wanted their kids to connect with the nature and to focus on climate change. And the youth, many volunteers, they come to me, says they're going to change their professions into environmental studies and social studies. They want to engage themselves in the process. So this is quite, I would say it is a remarkable achievements that we did during this community assemblies, that we actually reached kind of common sense, and we determined that we are actually going to do something. And you can see from this slides that over 50 community assemblies were conducted, and over they are coming from over 350 organizations. And the form is pretty diverse. You can do it online, offline, and with hybrid forms. And I believe that this movement will continue, and I'm going to hand it over to my friends, Amanda.
Thank you, Blair. Hi, everyone. It is very nice to talk to you. I'm Amanda, a Brazilian climate activist and advocate. And also I'm National Coordinator at Climate Science at the Brazilian community, to be more specific. So today, I think it is very important to say that I'm joining from Recife, a town which has been facing the impacts of extreme weather this past weekend. And unfortunately, we had thousands of people who were homeless right now and lives were lost. But also in Recife last year, I took part in Global Assembly as a community host. And I have to say it is a pleasure to be representing those who play an important role in making a global structure feasible at a local level. As Septrin said before, community hosts are those who recruit and work directly with Central Assembly members during the 3 months meeting. Personally, I will say they are the ones who testify and make sure that the participants go through a safe and motivating learning path, as well as an accessible one. I think it's very important to focus on accessibility as well. And I have to say it was very impressive to see the power of education from that close. And I would love to introduce you to how it all started. So in Brazil, we recruited people in both in-person and remote manners. Due to COVID-19, the core team gave us the possibility to work with the snowball mechanism, which is when you ask about 4 to 6 friends to introduce you to a friend you don't know. And then you ask the people you don't know to give you the contact details of one person you can try to recruit as a potential participant. But I was hoping I could tell you a little bit more about Wanderson's story. In Minas Gerais, another state from Brazil, community hosts started knocking on doors from communities close to the NGO headquarters. And the door-to-door methodology makes it possible, as Septin said before, to find people from different backgrounds to create a group that truly represents a snapshot of the planet's population. Fatima, one of the organization's volunteers, decided to explore a settlement close to her home. That's when she reached Wanderson. And among all 5 people that they recruited, he was selected, and he represented the voice of men with very few access to education. Since we now know we had people from across the globe, John, go ahead. Great. So I'll be performing right now. Communication was something that had to be well thought. So to stimulate interaction between members, Global Assembly counted on hand signals that could express different things. So I'll be showing some of them. For example, raising both hands in the air and waving them signals applause. Feel free to do it with me. And it can express things like, I agree, or even woohoo. And in case you have something to offer, for example, you should raise your arm, face the right fingers into the palm, and it can mean you have an alternative perspective or you need to say something like this. And because we were dealing with people's stories, this is a signal I like a lot because it means caring. So when you place your hand on your heart, it means you emphasize with someone and what the person is saying. So beyond those hand signals, participants were invited to work in conversation principles that oriented the whole experience. And I must say they were the ones who co-created it. And things like inclusion and respect were central to it. John? It also included a commitment to a common goal, as we said before, which was taking care of our planet to restore and safeguard a safe environment for both present and future generation. Active listening, which is very important, was as well a key point to it. I'll pass my word to John.
Thank you, Amanda, so much for that introduction to the conversation principles, to the recruitment, to the role, the critical role of community hosting, and to the wonderful hand signals. I will now talk a little bit about the co-creation approach that was used by assembly members to collectively develop the People's Declaration. So I'll just share my screen again. And we'll share this little diagram here to describe the co-creation approach. And importantly, this co-creation approach was used also for the conversation principles that Amanda just introduced, that were developed by the assembly members, as well as for the People's Declaration itself. And the idea was that the assembly members, because of the time zone differences, was very difficult to convene all 100 people together for all of the 67 hours that members spent together. So we would organize plenary sessions on Saturdays, all the way from 4 to 5 in the morning for the sort of Pacific West Coast in the United States, all the way until midnight in Korea, on the sort of furthest eastern side of the sort of global time zones that members were coming in from. And so we would organize these 3-hour plenary sessions on Saturdays. And then during the week, we would organize in the evenings along sort of longitudinal groupings where we had time zones that were roughly similar. We would organize breakout groups of 5 members. And these 5 members would work together alongside 19 other groups. And so these groups would then come together with 5 members. They would have a facilitator, they would each have translators, and they would generate proposals in these breakout groups. And then their proposals would go to a group of independent editors that would then merge these proposals from the breakout groups into a set of 4 proposals, and then into a final single set of proposals that would then go back to the assembly members in their breakout rooms, where they would be then commented upon, edited, revised, refined into another single set of 20 single sets of comments. And then editors would then merge these into a single version. This went through, for the conversation principles, 2 rounds, and then it was voted upon. And for the People's Declaration itself, it went through at least 3 rounds of generation, consolidation, commenting, consolidation, until members were then invited to vote line by line on the People's Declaration, to be able to finalize that and to ensure that the elements of the People's Declaration were really shared and commonly held by all of the members, and that all members were really collectively responsible for their co-creation. The overall sort of approach of the core assembly is outlined here. Members started in October, really trying to understand the current situation about the climate and ecological crisis. We developed information materials with wisdom keepers and scientists in a committee that was chaired by Sir Bob Watson, who had chaired the IPCC reports and IPBES reports. And this group of information materials supported members of the Assembly to learn about the climate and ecological situation and global decision-making on biodiversity. And then members transitioned into block 2, where they reviewed scenarios, pathways, and principles. And we essentially took all of the IPCC's forecasts and we created really user-friendly versions of this for the members of the Assembly to really understand, based on certain decisions such as diet and the amount of travel, for instance, what would happen to our different potential pathways of, for example, climate and biodiversity loss. And members reviewed these, they listened to witness testimonies and speakers. And then in the third block, they started to develop their principles that they wanted to guide world leaders' discussions at COP26. This became the first draft of what the Assembly members chose to call the People's Declaration for the Sustainable Future of Planet Earth. A draft version was presented at COP26 together with Nicola Sturgeon and important climate activists such as Vanessa Nakate and others on the opening day of COP26. In the fourth block of the Global Assembly, members actually observed and participated in COP26 to be able to really understand global climate negotiations and discussions, to see how their draft principles had been received and how that might have influenced decision-making. And so this was really a learning by doing process in the fourth block. And then in the fifth block, members of the Assembly came back together, and based on what they had seen and what they'd observed, they decided to invite some new speakers and explore different topics and to finalize and co-create the final version of the People's Declaration for the Sustainable Future of Planet Earth. And we're currently in the process of finalizing the report of the 2021 Global Assembly. If I might now invite my colleagues, we will together read out the summaries of the People's Declaration, which you could find on the website globalassembly.org. So I will read out the summary of the first section. The Paris Agreement is humanity's best chance. It must be affirmed and enforced by all governments and people, and rigorously monitored in collaboration with citizens and grassroots mechanisms. I'll hand over to Blair.
Equity must be a core focus when meeting the goals in the Paris Agreement. Spreading responsibility according to the capabilities and historical contributions of countries and corporations is vital. Actions on the climate crisis must be participatory, enabling people at all levels to contribute to decisions on climate, particularly groups from countries least historically responsible for and most affected by the climate crisis.
The right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment must be included in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and protected at multiple levels of law. We should raise awareness and citizen engagement on human rights in relation to climate and the environment. This declaration is grounded in the importance of nature having intrinsic values and rights, and in all beings on Earth forming an interconnected whole. We must protect nature from ecocide legally, engaging communities and establishing multiple governing bodies to enable this.
Education on climate change must be formally integrated within the school syllabus and in governmental communications, and also informally disseminated through more accessible platforms like social medias to reach as many people as possible. To ensure a fair and just energy transition, we must ensure that countries and people with less means are supported through a gradual change and recognize recognize the shared responsibility between citizens, governments, and corporations in enabling it.
Thank you so much, colleagues. So now I have the very sincere pleasure of being able to invite two of our dear Assembly members to share about their experiences in the Global Assembly and their experiences in co-creating this document that my colleagues and I in the organization team had the intense honor of supporting the Assembly members to co-create. If I might start by inviting Dian to introduce himself, please.
Buongiorno dall'Italia. Mi sentite? Sono Dian Bosniakovic e parlo da Milano.
Good morning from Italy. My name is Dian Bosniakovic and I'm speaking from Milan.
Per tanti anni avevo una libreria perché sostanzialmente mi piacciono le storie.
For many years I've been working in a library because I like stories.
E se ci penso, come sono finito nell'Assemblea Globale, sono finito grazie alle storie.
And if I think of the way that I ended up in the Global Assembly, it was because of stories.
Tutti noi abbiamo una storia da raccontare.
Each one of us has a story to tell.
E una di queste storie è il racconto di mia figlia che per motivi di studio è stata in Africa a fare una ricerca su una grande discarica della roba elettronica.
And one of these stories is from my daughter. She was in Africa to study a huge landfill of electronic waste.
Mi ha raccontato le cose incredibili e questo ha stimolato la mia voglia di scoprire di più.
She told me incredible things and she stimulated my desire and my wish to know more about this topic.
E quando si è presentata l'occasione di entrare nel Global Assembly, l'ho accettato volentieri.
So when I had the opportunity to be part of the Global Assembly, I was very keen to accept it.
E lavorare in Global Assembly è stata un'esperienza fantastica.
And being part of the Global Assembly was an incredible experience.
Facevo parte del mitico gruppo 7.
I was part of group number 7.
E i miei compagni erano dei veri paesi africani.
And my colleagues in group number 7 were from different countries in Africa.
E veramente potevamo rispecchiare diverse realtà del mondo in cui viviamo.
And we really could represent different realities of the world in which we live in.
E la prima esperienza, il primo incontro mi faceva pensare che realizzare i nostri propositi non sarebbe stato assolutamente possibile.
So during the first meeting, I thought that it would be really impossible to achieve our goals.
Motivo era la connessione internet.
And this was because of internet connection.
Che praticamente per i ragazzi che parlavano dell'Africa era molto instabile.
Because internet connection was really unstable for people connecting from Africa.
Ma si è dimostrato che anche questa difficoltà in realtà era un qualcosa che ci ha reso più forti.
But in the end, this challenge was something that made us stronger.
Avevamo diverse difficoltà davanti a noi e tanta voglia di imparare e di mettersi in discussione.
So we had many challenges in front of us, but we also had a willingness to learn and to challenge ourselves.
Diverse volte si è discusso degli argomenti molto specifici che richiedono una preparazione.
Many times we discussed about topics that are very specific and require a previous knowledge.
Però si è confermato che non sta tutto nella competenza.
But we confirmed that not only knowledge or competence is important,
Competenza è importante,
knowledge is important,
però è anche importante la consapevolezza della autoefficacia.
but also being aware of our own power or empowerment is important.
Cioè la consapevolezza di poter fare malgrado tutte le difficoltà che ci sono.
So being aware that we can do something even though we are facing many challenges.
E in tal modo abbiamo affrontato tutto quello che si presentava.
And in this way, we faced all the challenges that we had.
Abbiamo avuto sempre l'occasione di parlare tutti.
We always had the opportunity to talk. Everybody had this opportunity.
Di discutere sulle cose che pensavamo in modo uguale o in modo diverso.
Discuss things with different perspectives.
A volte eravamo tutti d'accordo, a volte c'erano differenze che arricchivano la discussione.
In certain occasions, we all had the same perspective. In other, we had to discuss different perspectives.
Ma una cosa è certa, che tutti abbiamo portato a casa una esperienza della urgenza di presa della consapevolezza della crisi globale.
But in the end, we all were aware of the urgency that we had of facing this global challenge.
E questo è un qualcosa molto importante perché una volta finita l'assemblea globale rimangono i nostri contatti quotidiani, le nostre realtà quotidiane in cui questa conoscenza e questa forza inizia a diffondersi.
And this is very important because when the global assembly finished, we still have our everyday lives and everyday contacts and everyday actions.
Sono felice di aver condiviso questa esperienza con miei amici da diversi paesi di diversi paesi.
I'm very happy to have shared this experience with my friends from all over the world.
Di imparare molto di loro vita che è così diversa dalla mia vita.
And to learn about their lives that are so different from mine.
E di avere rispetto per le differenze, ancora di più.
And have even more respect for different lifestyles.
E la necessità che hanno più deboli. E le necessità che hanno più deboli che praticamente hanno inquinato di meno e su quale tutta la questione ambientale pesa di più.
And the needs of those who have polluted less and that are supporting the worst impacts of climate consequences.
Uno dei principi importanti di cui abbiamo discusso è legato al diritto di vivere in un ambiente sano.
So one of the principles that we discussed is related to the right to live in a healthy environment.
È un qualcosa che riguarda non soltanto noi, ma che riguarda anche le generazioni future.
And it's something that it's not only related to the present moment and to us, but also to future generations.
Significa la responsabilità.
And it means responsibility.
In ottica di quello che 50 anni della prima conferenza di Stoccolma e 26 principi che provengono dalla dichiarazione di Stoccolma, si potrebbe dire che alcune questioni rimangono aperte.
And thinking of these past 50 years after the first Stockholm conference, we can say that some topics still remain unresolved.
Diverse cose sono state fatte. Diverse cose sono aperte e richiedono una educazione e richiedono una azione di presa di coscienza della importanza della questione globale.
Many things have been done, but others still need to be faced, and they need education and awareness about the importance of taking action.
Per il momento, grazie.
Thank you.
Dan, thank you so much for these remarks, for sharing that with all of us. If I might now invite Fan Yu to share, please introduce yourself and feel free to share about your experiences of co-creating the People's Declaration as well.
大家好，我的名字叫孟凡玉，我来自中国，今年19岁，就读于伦敦艺术大学。
Hello, everyone. My name is Meng Fan Yu. I'm from China. I'm 19 years old. I study in London Art College.
我是基因大会的参与者，基因大会给了我很多难忘的经历。以我自己的例子来讲，
I was a participant in the Global Assembly conference, which brought me many unforgettable experiences.
以我自己的例子来讲，我的家乡来自中国北方的一个小城市，那里人们在教育中缺乏环保和人与自然和谐共处的理念。从小到大，学校从来没有教过有关环保的任何知识，只有日复一日的分数和成绩。秋冬时节总是能闻到烧秸秆的味道，在不远处的乡下，人们砍伐树木用以维持生计。
For example, I'm going to use my own experience to share the ideas about environmental protection. My hometown is a small city in North China, where peoples are lack of the concept of environmental protection and harmonious coexistence between man and nature in education. From childhood to adulthood, there's a very few knowledge of environmental protection was taught in schools. They only strengthen that grades and achievements in academics are very important, but they put very little attention to environmental protection. The smell of straws burning is always there in autumn and winter, which means that they are always burning those straws. And in the countryside, no far away, people cutting down trees to make a living.
受这些影响，我曾经认为保护环境是一个巨大的人类命题，对我这样的普通人来说无关要紧，因为在我的日常中，我很少能有机会去接触到它。但是参加接力之后，当我在会议中看到关于地球在人类大肆破坏下越来越缺乏生机，我才意识到原来环境与人是息息相关的。
Influenced by all of this, I used to think that protecting the environment was a huge human proposition, that it doesn't matter to an ordinary people like me because I have very little access to it in my daily life. However, after attending the Global Assembly, when I heard and saw that the earths are becoming more and more lifeless under the massive destruction of human beings, and I realized that the environment was related to human beings, every single one of us.
于是我开始反思，作为地球的一员，在享受自然带来的馈赠的同时，是不是也应该承担保护环境的义务？我们必须对它负责，因为人与自然的关系是人类社会最基本的关系。自然界是人类社会产生、存在和发展的基础和必然的前提。人类则可以通过社会实践活动，有目的的利用自然，改造自然。但人类归根结底是自然的一部分。在开发自然、利用自然的过程中，人类不能凌驾于自然之上，人类的行为方式必须符合自然规律。
I begin to reflect on whether, as a member of the earth, while enjoying the gifts brought by nature, I'm a part of it. We should also undertake the obligations of environmental protection. We have to take the responsible for it. The relationship between man and nature is the most basic relationship in the human society. nature of human society and the existence and the development, we must and will do the social practice to purposefully use the nature and the transformations of nature. And at the end, it will come to the essence of the relations again. In the process of development, the use of nature, we cannot get over it. We cannot get rid of it. We cannot live independently without it. We must conform the laws of nature.
中国有句古话叫“绿水青山就是金山银山”，意思是以可持续发展、人与自然和谐为目标，建设生产发展、生活富裕、生态良好的文明社会。但建设生态文明，不是说我们要放弃工业文明，回到原始的生产生活方式，而是要以资源环境承载能力为基础，以自然规则为准则，以可持续发展、人与自然和谐为目标，建设生产发展、生活富裕、生态良好的文明社会。
As a Chinese saying goes, clean waters and green mountains are the mountains of gold and silver. It aims at sustainable development and harmony between man and nature to build a civil society with productive development, rich life, and sound ecology. However, to build an ecological civilization doesn't mean abandoning industrial civilizations or returning to a primitive way of production and life. Instead, we should build a society with productive development, a life and sound ecological environment on the basis of carrying capacity of resources and the environment in accordance to the laws of nature and with sustainable development between man and nature as its goal.
在那之后，我不仅在认知上改变了很多，而且在行为习惯上也改变了很多。例如，我养成了随手关灯和注意垃圾分类的习惯，因为保护和改善人类环境是关系到全世界人民的幸福和经济发展的重要问题。
After that, I started to realize my changes, not only in my cognition, but also in my behavior. For example, I got the habit of turning off the lights and pay attention to garbage sorting. Because protecting the environment and human environment is an important issue concerning the happiness and economic development of people all over the world.
在历史上，我们已经到了必须要更仔细考虑我们在世界各地的行动对环境造成的后果的时候。这段经历也是我从事公益工作的一个起点。参加会议后，我参加了很多公益活动，比如为残疾儿童捐款、支教等。我希望把基业的精神传递下去，成为照亮更多人的一盏明灯。
The time in history has been rich when we must consider more carefully the environmental consequences of our actions around the world. The experience was also a starting point for me to do public welfare work. After participating in the conference, I participated in some public welfare activities such as donating money for disabled children and supporting educations in rural areas. I hope to pass the spirit of global assembly and to become a light to illuminate more people.
通过这次会议，我不仅提高了我的个人能力，也开始思考我能为社会做些什么，能为社会贡献什么。
Through this meeting, I not only improve my personal ability, but also start to think about what can I do for the society and what contributions can I make to the society.
虽然我认为目前人类宣言的影响是有限的，因为很多人还没有形成气候变化相关的意识。然而，我对人类宣言也充满了信心，因为在会议上，我看到了这么多人对保护环境有自己独特的看法。他们分享着自己在生活中为建设绿色星球添砖加瓦的例子，如何家人一起植树、捡拾社区垃圾、用低碳步行代替开车等等。他们的分享让我看到了很多人已经超越了狭隘的视野，开始拥抱更广阔的世界。
Although I think the impact of the Human Declaration is limited at the moment, because many people have not formed an awareness related to climate change. However, I was also full of confidence in the declaration because at the meeting, I saw so many people with their own unique views on protecting the environment. They share their own examples of contributing to the buildings of a green planet in their lives, such as planting trees with their families, picking up litters in the community, using low carbon walking instead of driving, and so on. Their sharing made me see how many people are moved beyond their narrow vision and embrace the wider world.
我很喜欢这一负责人 Avery 所言。我恳求你，对你心中所有未解决的问题都要有耐心，试着去爱这些答案问题本身，就好像他们是锁着的房间或者用外国语言所写的书。不要去寻找答案，那些答案或许现在无法给你，因为你无法活在那些答案里。关键是你要活出一切，现在就活在那些问题中。也许到那时，在遥远将来的某一天。你会在不知不觉中逐渐找到答案。
I love a facilitator at the Global Assembly, which was named AB, said, I beg you to be patient with everything unresolved in your heart and to try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms in books written in a very foreign language. Do not search for the answer which could not given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And this point is to live everything. Live the question now. Perhaps then, someday, not far away in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the question.
在未来，我希望我能不忘初心，继续传承这一精神。努力改善环境质量，创造出更美好的生活，让我们的下一代在充满希望的环境中过上美好的生活。谢谢。
In the future, I hope that I can stay true to my aspiration, continue to pass this Global Assembly spirit, and to strive to improve the qualities of the environment and to create a better life in my generation, so that my generation and the next generation can live a better life in a hopeful environment. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dian and Fanyu, for sharing your experiences. Two of our Global Assembly members, and of course to Amanda, to Blair, and Martina, also for taking part of this event. Now we proceed to we have a few minutes to go through our questions. We have questions here from our webinar participants that we can ask. I think all of us can answer this, but I would like to hear also from our Global Assembly members. The first question talks about your memorable experience in the Global Assembly. I think all of us have memorable experience in the Global Assembly. The facilitators, the translators, and the participants. But who will talk first? Can we ask Dian, what is your most memorable experience in the Global Assembly?
Dunque, è stato più di una esperienza, però accomunate da un elemento. Rispetto per l'esperienza diretta della persona di un'altra comunità, di un'altra cultura, di un'altra civiltà. E ciò significa che più di una volta siamo trovati tutti insieme a ascoltare con grande attenzione ciò che aveva da condividere compagno o qualcun altro della realtà della sua vita e del suo paese.
So we had more than one memorable experience, and the common thread was the respect for the lived experience of people of different cultures and different backgrounds. And more than once, we found ourselves listening with great attention to what other participants were sharing about their personal lives or personal experiences.
Right. Thank you so much. It was very enriching hearing all those experiences from our Global Assembly members from different parts of the world. But all those experiences are actually shared, right? But we learn from it. We share the same experience, but we have different levels of looking at these problems we experience from all over the world as far as the ecological crisis are concerned. But what about Fanyu? Can you share your
Yes，我
All
想
right.
要分享的是，在金融会议中，我在我的房间里，我遇到了很多的人。我们虽然有着不同的语言，然后不同的皮肤，来自不同的国家、不同的文化，但是很奇妙的是，通过短短的时间里，然后我们通过因为一个环境保护话题而逐渐的熟悉起来，逐渐在这个会议中一起分享着为环境保护而不断的如何去做出自己的贡献。让我觉得一个非常神奇的点，也是一个非常有凝聚力的一个点。然后这个经历在我的未来的生活中给了我很多的一些启发，然后包括如何和别人一起完成一件公益事业啊，或者是如何去让更多人可以看到地球被污染的现象，以及一起去做一些贡献。
So I'm going to share some of the experience that I have in my rooms. So we're coming from different cultures and different countries speaking different languages. But something that I felt very, very magical is that within a very short period of time, we were able to get very close and actually share the mutual ideas that we're going to do something to solve the problems of environmental issues. And this becomes a methodology and aspirations in the future when I try to do my own charity works or social works, that I'm going to use this strength, use this method to communicate with people and to aspire strangers to actually connect together and try to solve and offer our solutions to the problems. So that's the thing that I felt the most amazed one. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fanyu. Thank you, Blair. Yes, I think when we ended the activity, when we ended the event last year, we were all emotional. Because in a short period of time, we created a family, a global family with shared aspirations towards the future, and we know from that day that we won't stop. That the Global Assembly is not the only thing that we should do to address the ecological crisis. But I think it's also important to ask from Amanda as a cluster as a community host in Brazil.
Of course. Well, I believe the whole process was very remarkable and very emotional as well. But I think the outcomes of it are impressive. And the moment that was the most remarkable for me was when Dona Josie, which is the assembly member from Recife, looked at me and said, Amanda, thank you for that. Thank you for recruiting me, and thank you for being by my side during this whole process. And this is very, it is the best thing to hear as a community host. And she was saying that before the whole experience, she didn't even know what was happening in the whole world, but to be more precise, she didn't know what was happening to her and to her community. Because whenever it rains here in Recife, we have people who lost their lives or their homes, as I said before. So she was telling me that she didn't know what was happening to her community, and she didn't know how to act. And then she looked at me and said, after the whole thing, after Global Assembly, I want to act on this. I want to change the world. I want to be by your side as an activist to take climate education to everyone in our town. And she was very inspired to be the change we needed here. And I have to say she's 62 right now. And she was talking to me about how she thought it was something for the youth only, and how it is a current problem. It is a current crisis, and she needs to be the one who is in the front line of it as well. So it was very, very remarkable, and I will always be thankful for having Dona Josie with me.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda. Well, personally, I have to be cheesy on that memorable experience because there's a lot of memorable experience aside from being emotional and the remarkable outcome and the content that we shared. Like for example, if you can remember the moment that we sang the happy birthday, I'm using the different languages around with all the participants. I think that was memorable. I really cannot forget that moment when the happy birthday was sung all together using different languages. All right, so we can proceed to the next question about what can you share about what you learn about the climate crisis, yourself and your fellow humankind. Who will answer this first? I think John can write it in the chat box. Can you share about what you learned about the climate crisis, yourself, and our fellow humankind? Who will talk first?
I guess I'm gonna speak for the question.
All right, go Blair.
Yeah, because in the past, I think from my education, we might assume that scientists are actually lying or they're giving fake status that, okay, they say that the climate is actually changing, but we have a theory says, oh, the global warming is due to its natural course. But then I started to realize it's the human activity that speed it up, that the warming is growing with a unprecedented and ununderstandable process. It's like the 1.0 degrees of the increase of our weather is doomed. It's like the weather is going warmer and warmer, and we might gonna achieve 2 degrees, and that will be like maybe it's the end of the world, but we have no idea. But the future is coming. So at that point, I started to realize that the thing is real. It's not like what Elon Musk said. The scientists are lying. But yeah, so that's the thing that I realized the most. And the second I'm going to share is the butterfly effects. Is that one single butterfly can actually affect the whole food chain and affects the whole environment, not only the North America, but also the Atlantic environment, and it's all linked. So at that time, I feel like it's urgent that we're going to act together, all together. Yeah, that's
Right.
all.
Right. Thank you, Blair. I want the others to prepare for that question about the learning on climate crisis because I want to go back to John. So John, who must also share his memorable experience. I think John was one of the common faces in the Global Assembly. Right, John.
The common faces. So I think I have two actually, and listening to Dian speak before reminded me of one, and I'm gonna share my screen again. This is an example of one of the materials in the information materials that was shared with participants. And if you can see these red dots, what we have here is a map of planet Earth, where all of the participants were located for the Global Assembly. And we see the changes in precipitation. What happens with 4 degrees of global warming. And we see the impact on drought in certain areas that are already prone to drought. And we see that areas that are already prone to heavy rainfall, as perhaps here on the edge in Recife, what's going to happen under these simulated changes. And it was really interesting in Dian's breakout group as an observer, I was able to see one participant coming from an area that's really prone to drought ask to the group, what could be wrong with having too much rain? And this is, I think, really, it was just hitting home the real value of lived experiences and how difficult it can be sometimes for us to empathize with experiences and that are so foreign to our own. And one of the other members of the breakout group is coming from Central Africa, from an area that's really prone to rainfall, and was able to share the impact in terms of as Amanda was just sharing about the impact of mudslides and excess rainfall and what happens to communities, the price of agricultural goods raising because they can't be transported from the cities to the rural communities because the roads have been destroyed by the rain and mud. So that is one example that I wanted to be able to share with anyone watching, to be able to really get a feeling for how these information materials were developed, but also processed by the members of the assembly, and how much the members were able to really learn from each other, as well as from the witnesses and from the information materials. And the second is actually a memory with Septrin and Blair and her colleague Millie from Shimmer SDG Hub in the cluster facilitator meeting. Because as we mentioned, this is the first time a global assembly has ever been organized. And this has been a dream. Political scientists by the name of John Dryzek wrote a book 30 odd years ago about this. And you can point to philosophers at least 2,000 years ago dreaming about cosmopolitanism and sort of a collective humanity making decisions together. But this is really the first time that human-to-human governance has ever taken place at this level through a really fair global process of recruitment. And last year around August, we were trying to conclude the recruitment of community hosts. And so, the 9 organizations that Septrin mentioned, the cluster facilitators, were basically recruiting community organizations like Amanda's in Recife to be able to organize the recruitment of participants. And the Global Assembly was starting in the beginning of October. So we had to finish we had to get all of the community hosts recruited to be able to find the assembly members, to be able to run the sortition process. And we were having weekly meetings of the cluster facilitators at this time. And every week we'd say, okay, one more week, we're going to keep it open for one more week. And of course, it was ambitious to think we were going to find 100 community host organizations around the world to organize this, especially on the timeline of preparing something before COP26. And so we thought, okay, if we can find at least 85 of the community host organizations from these 100 locations, and then we would meet and we would say, okay, we got to 87, let's give it one more week. And it was just the energy of the group of just not wanting to not wanting to let go of the dream, but I think also realizing that the Global Assembly is bigger than all of us, and really wanting to do justice to that dream of reimagining global governance. And it was really my favorite experience of coming to that weekly meeting and thinking, okay, are we going to be able to start the participant recruitment and finalize the selection? It was like, no, one more week. And I'm so grateful. And I think it's just such a testament to the beautiful community that's possible when we really come together with mutual respect and really at the same level and co-create solutions together as humanity. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Of course, if I'm going to add to that, the weekly meetings, also, I think personally, I almost familiarize the time zones, because we're talking about different time zones. So thank you, John, for sharing that. And can someone also, another one, who want to share about the learning about the climate crisis, yourself and your fellow humankind? Yes, Dian, please.
Ho imparato tante cose che in qualche modo mi anche hanno stimolato di cercare le cose simili e imparare ancora di più. E vi darò un esempio.
So I've learned many things, and they also stimulated me to learn even more. And I will give you an example.
Soprattutto a quest'ora, una delle attività preferite in Italia è mettere l'acqua per la pasta. Si prepara il pranzo.
So at this time in Italy, one of the favorite activities is to boil water to cook pasta for lunch.
La ricetta della nonna dice che a 100 grammi di pasta ci vuole 1 litro di acqua.
And any grandmother's recipe says that for 100 grams of pasta, you need 1 liter of water.
È stato calcolato che cambiando la ricetta, visto che la qualità della pasta dei tempi della nonna è cambiata molto, cambiando la qualità dell'acqua si possono fare grandissimi risparmi.
So it was calculated that if we reduce the amount of water, we could save a lot, because also the quality of pasta has changed since our grandmother's time.
La nuova ricetta dice questo. Se io metto 700 millilitri di acqua e faccio bollire l'acqua con un coperchio per metà del tempo di cottura previsto, risparmio quello che vi dico dopo.
So the new recipe says that if you use only 700 milliliters of water and you cook your pasta half of the regular time with the lid on top, you will save a lot.
Se tutti gli italiani facessero così, in un anno, con la quantità dell'acqua che si risparmia, si potrebbero riempire 2000 piscine.
And if all Italians did like this, with the water that you would save in 1 year, you could fill 2000 swimming pools.
E il risparmio dell'emissione della carbone idrica significa che praticamente quello che corrisponde a risparmio è come se praticamente una macchina andasse 21 volte, cioè praticamente quello che si consumerebbe di CO2 se una macchina per un 21 volte va alla distanza dal cielo, dalla terra al sole.
And you would save the same amount of CO2 that a car would use to go 21 times from the earth to the sun.
Soltanto per preparare un piatto di pasta.
Only by cooking pasta.
Vuol dire, nella nostra vita quotidiana possiamo fare molto.
So it means that in our daily lives we can do a lot.
Una di queste cose, come veniva suggerito prima, è vivere con la domanda.
And one of the things that we can do, as was suggested before, is to live the question.
Una di queste domande a cui non ho risposta è come la produzione delle armi può essere ritenuta una attività economica sostenibile.
And one of the questions that I have, and I still don't have an answer, is how the production of weapons could be considered sustainable.
Una delle domande con quale devo vivere, perché la risposta non ce l'ho, quando inizieremo a usare i soldi che diamo per le armi per sconfiggere la fame o per aiutare questo passaggio energetico e climatico che dobbiamo vivere tutti?
And another question I have to live with, because I have no answer, is when will we use the money that we now use for weapons to support the energy transition and to solve climate change and to end the hunger, for example?
Grazie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dian. I didn't see it coming that we will talk about climate crisis and pasta. That's very. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. But of course, Dian also leave us a very important question, which I think we can also ask this from our experience in the Global Assembly. would we recommend this kind of process, the deliberative democracy, to become part of international decision making? Or how important is this deliberative process for the international decision making? Can we recommend this, the one that we did in the Global Assembly? Who would like to go first?
I think I can go first. 100%. Yes, sure. I would recommend this to everyone, especially because we're talking about a problem that has to do with justice. So we cannot talk about climate and environmental issues without talking about social and climate justice and environmental justice. And if we're talking about justice, we need to have a seat at the table for everyone. So I believe Global Assembly showed me that we can have the people who are in the front line of the problem saying what they want for the future, saying what they want for the present, and deliberating on something that has to do with their lives and considering their backgrounds and everything they went through. So I believe it's very important for us to spread this structure, this governance structure for everyone, so we can try to find a more fair and just way to fight the climate crisis, to mitigate whatever we're going through, and to save lives, as I said before. Yes, that's pretty much what I think I would recommend to everyone. And I really want everyone to have the experience I had before, because it was life-changing.
Right, I agree on that, but we can proceed to, we can also hear from Fanyu. Do you want to share something about what we did? Is it, can you recommend what we did in the Global Assembly?
我感觉我在这个会议中做了很多，最开始也遇到了很多问题，比如说我们大家会产生语言不通的一种情况，这导致我们最开始的前几节会议是完全无法交流的一个状态。后来随着大家的沟通越来越多，其实就越来越心有灵犀了。就是当大家拿到一个问题之后，然后大家会想办法，如何去让有一个 room 的人去合力解决，而不是就是大家都在各想各的去各自发挥自己的意见。然后在后期中，我也收获了很多的朋友，然后收获到很多的文化方面的学习。通过听他们国家对于环保的一些方法，我也学到了他们国家独特的文化精髓，也开阔了我的视野。
So the answer is definitely yes, but I'm thinking about the implementing problems, because at first when we have the Global Assembly meeting, the biggest problem is the language barriers, because at the very beginning we bear to understand each other. Everyone tried to express their ideas, everyone tried to bring out their own thoughts, but at the same time they just feel really hard to understand. But then later, gradually, we have the sense of community. Everyone's have this sense of cooperation and thinking about the same issue, not just from their own perspective, but also from other people's perspective. So at the same time, at the end, I receive a lot of new friendship. We form unique interpretation towards different culture. And at the end, this process, I would say, is succeeded. And we have the platform to actually share and to combine. So in conclusion, the idea is, yes, we're definitely going to promote the idea, the process, but there's a lot of obstacles that we need to conquer together as a whole.
Right. Thank you. Important concepts there, the sense of cooperation and the sense of community, which I think led us to understand better, regardless of the language and locations and time zones. I think that's what we also experience in the really experience in the Global Assembly. But we can turn to Dian if you want to say something on that question.
Dunque anche io confermo decisamente una esperienza profonda da ripetere e da divulgare.
So it's the same for me. It's an experience that we should repeat and disseminate.
È praticamente è un po' come riprendere il proprio potere.
and it is a bit like empowering ourselves.
O se mi permettete nel mio linguaggio, un po' come riprendere la propria storia.
Or to use my own language, a way to own our own stories.
Se ciascuno di noi racconta una storia, decisamente questa storia diventa più interessante nel momento in cui incontra altre storie di altre persone che vogliono riprendere il loro potere e agire nel beneficio di tutta la comunità.
If each one of us tells a story, this story becomes more powerful when it meets other people who are telling their stories and are willing to get back their power and work for the benefit of community.
Abbiamo discusso delle questioni che riguardano problematiche climatiche, però ci sono anche altre possibilità di discutere di altri temi caldi di cui siamo tutti partecipi e dove è assolutamente necessario che la popolazione esprime proprio interesse e propria voglia di vivere.
So we discussed a topic related to climate change, but there are many other topics that we are all part of, and for which it is necessary that people express their opinions and their love for life.
Un buon inizio è cercare di iniziare dalla propria famiglia, almeno nel caso mio è stato molto utile, coinvolgendo anche la famiglia allargata nelle discussioni che prima non si facevano e che riguardano proprio ambiente.
And a good way to start is to start from our families. At least for me, it was a starting point to involve members of my family in discussions about the environment and those topics.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that, Dian. Yeah, I think the word I got there is very empowering. The deliberative process is very empowering, and personally, from the experience of conducting deliberative forums in communities here in the Philippines, I can see that there's a promise. That this is a very promising methodology involving ordinary citizens and listening to their voices and taking part of the decision-making process. So I hope that can be taken seriously in the global scale. But before I'm handing this over to Blair for the closing session, we have one question for everyone that we can answer this in one sentence. For all the viewers we have right now, there's one important question. What is your recommendation to the people watching this video? Because this is recorded, this will be disseminated later on. One sentence. What is your recommendation to the people watching us right now? We can start with Fanyu, and then Blair, and then Amanda, Martina, or Dian. Yeah.
Ho capito quello che aveva detto.
First, okay, I'll start now. 通过这次会议，其实我想给正在观看的一些观众来讲，其实我觉得每个人都不应该将自己置身于地球之外。保护环境它并不是一个庞大的人类的问题，它更多的就是每一个地球上的人，大家去携手共创一个美好的环境。其实每个人做的多一点，你会发现这个社会，这个世界就会变得更美好一点。所以我希望，正在观看的这些观众朋友，不管是曾经和我有着一样的想法也好，然后亦或者看了这个视频有了很大的改变也好，我都希望他们可以加入我们，成为我们的一份子。其实成为我们的一份子没有那么困难，它不是说你要作为一个政府高官，或者你要成为一个非常有权有势的商人，你才能够投资或者对这个社会做出一些改变。其实不是的，其实很多时候它都是 要从小事做起，比如说随手关灯，比如说用步行代替交通，比如说打扫公共卫生，这都是可以让我们的地球变得更美好的事情。所以我希望未来能有更多的人意识到这个环保问题，然后大家一起去为这个更好的明天去做贡献。
Okay, there's a lot of things that she mentioned. I think the conclusion is to think big and start little. It means that we don't have to consider that this is a problem that we have to become officials, we have to become leaders and governance to actually start acting, but we can start it by doing little things in our lives. So the conclusion is think big and start little.
Yeah. What about you, Blair? What is your recommendation to the? Yeah.
I think for me, it's to act now, like start action. Because we already hear a lot of blah, blah, blah. Now we need to actually do something.
What about Amanda?
I would say trust yourself and trust in your power to change a reality. And yes, that's pretty much what I would like to say.
Right. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, and let's take Dion first and then Martina.
Una delle cose che raccomando è andare di più in natura, connettersi con la natura, con Gaia, con la natura che vive, sentire il suo potere e trasmetterlo agli altri. Tutta la vita cambia.
One of the things that I recommend is to connect more with nature, go more often in nature and connect with Gaia and its power for life, and your life will change.
Right. It's Martina.
Yes, and I'm speaking as community host and translator, so changing my role. What I would recommend, it's a bit difficult to have multiple roles, but I would recommend to hold on to a vision of a different world and of being part of this huge change that is happening now, and to hold on to that vision of how beautiful it could be.
Thank you. Me personally, I think I'm so romantic about this. Just look at the sunset, just look at the sunrise, just look at the ocean, just look at the beach, just look at the mountains. What if we will lost all these beautiful scenes? What will happen to us and what will happen to the future? So join us and let's act this together. That's my recommendation to the viewers right now. And thank you so much, John.
If I had to choose one, so the Global Assembly in the beginning days, we co-created a set of principles and values that would guide our work together to really anchor our collective work as partners. And I think the most important principle and value, our North Star, if you will, is to focus on the means and not the ends. And it's really to recognize that the most urgent challenge we face is not to propose solutions, but to come up with better ways of generating solutions together. So very much linked with what Amanda was saying as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering the questions and sharing your perspectives and insights. Now, I'm handing this over to Blair for the closing session. Blair?
Thank you so much. The purpose and the missions of the Stockholm+50 is actually to reflect the urgent needs for actions, address these inter-reactions that we create today, and the intercommunication and the connection between multi-stakeholders. By cognizing the importance of multilateralism and the participation of all different kinds of people in tackling the Earth's planetary crisis is crucial. And this event will act as a springboard to accelerate the implementation of the EU action and the realization of our common vision, the People's Declaration. It's critical that the Stockholm+50 meaningfully reimagine and initiate a new model of the global environmental governance, which we already mentioned today is the public participation. So joining the Global Assembly, joining us is exactly doing that. You can get involved in the organization community assemblies. You can join your local assembly team, and appropriating those tools and informations that we offer, such as Wikipedia, such as academic information that we already share on our websites and links. I think these are very useful methodology and tools for you to actually start action. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule and join us with all your great contributions today. And if you wanted to know more about our details and plans in the future, please follow our websites and follow our social media accounts to stay connected. And if you had the chance to, please subscribe our newsletter also. And thank you so much for coming. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you everyone so much.